The History of Monosodium Glutamate, the Hidden Neurotoxic Chemical, Part 2.
Hello! Ready for Part 2? Most of the information is taken from my book, Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills.
In Part 1, you read about how MSG is produced and what hidden ingredients to look for and some results of studies. In this comic, you'll read about the glutamate industry and how it is protected by government agencies. I'll also talk about serious diseases that MSG can cause or worsen.
Mommy, I want to hear about those exciting toxins again.
Excitotoxins, they're called excitotoxins. And they're very dangerous, darling. They excite neurons to death, but you might not know until you get sick, and then it's too late.
Dr. Blaylock, can you tell us more about putting MSG in baby food? It sounds awful.
Absolutely. MSG was added to baby foods in the 1960s. In fact, the concentrations of MSG found in baby foods was equal to that used to create brain lesions in experimental animals. And in all of these experiments, immature animals were found to be much more vulnerable to the toxic effects of MSG than were the older animals. This was true in all animal species tested. Millions of babies were being poisoned by these chemicals.
It's rough.
The food industry invested millions of dollars in developing the use of MSG and hydrolyzed protein.
Glutamate can alter the way the brain is formed during development. This could cause learning difficulties, behavioral problems in children, such as aggression.
Clear up your room.
Shut up. Make me.
What's wrong?
I can't control her, doctor, and the school says she should go on behavioral drugs. What do you think?
Is there an ADHD, ADD epidemic because of what the children are eating and drinking? Possibly.
MSG and Aspartame.
More dangerous together than alone.
You and me, babe, will rule the world. We are the excitotoxins.
We'll kill them together.
Those studies by Dr. Olney and others should have rung warning bells for the authorities in charge of the food safety in every country.
Yet it was still being added to foods. Go away. We, the FDA, choose to do nothing.
Dr. Olney felt he had to speak out. He spoke to the FDA, who refused to take action, which left him no choice but to go public. After a testimony before a congressional committee, they agreed to remove it, but sort of didn't.
They swapped out MSG for hydrolyzed protein, which is more dangerous than MSG. 7 more years passed, still hydrolyzed protein remained, and today food manufacturers often disguise it or mix it with other substances that already contain a high concentration of glutamate. So when you see natural flavoring, it could contain anything from 20 to 60% MSG.
Earlier, I mentioned a substance called hydrolyzed vegetable protein, also referred to as a vegetable protein or plant protein. This powerful excitotoxin mixture is often portrayed as a perfectly safe and natural substance.
After all, we manufacturers say, it's made from plants.
The end product is a brown powder that is 3 known excitotoxins: glutamate, aspartate, and cystoic acid, which converts in the body to cystine. It is then added by the food industry to products.
The Glutamate Industry.
Top manufacturers of MSG: Fufeng Group Company, Meihua Biological Technology, Ningxia Eppin Company, Hehen Lotus Gourmet Powder, Shandong Kilo Group Company, Shandong Zinel Bioengineering, Fujin Wei MSG Company, Ajinomoto Group Company, Great American Spice Company, McCormick, and
Major company profiles: flavor enhancers, Fufeng, Meihua, Ajinomoto Group, Eppin, Lionhua, Angel Yeast, Shandong Kilo Biotechnology Group, Biospringer, Oli, DSM, Innova Labor, APU Food Industry.
The global key manufacturers of autolyzed yeast are Associated British Foods plc, Lallement Incorporated, Lesafer Biorigin, Oli GmbH.
Major players in the hydrolyzed plant protein market: Archer Daniels Midland, New Alliance Dichem, Tate and Lyle, Carey, Riquette Freers, Cargill, Pevisa, Griffith Foods, Friesland Campana Ingredients, Calisma, A. Constantino and C. Astron Limited, Ajinomoto Philippines, RK Food Products, MGP.
The corporate face of the glutamate industry. What's that picture, Mummy? It's so bright, and there's so many pictures. I can't see.
That's the 10 companies that control the world's processed food market. Their demand for profits over health will blind you. Come away.
The few rule the world food supply. A scary thought.
Degenerative brain diseases in adults such as Parkinson's disease, Huntington's, Alzheimer's, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, to mention a few. All of these diseases show a slow destruction of brain cells. They are specifically sensitive to excitotoxin damage.
More and more diseases of the nervous system are being linked to excitotoxin buildup in the brain. Disorders such as strokes, brain injury, hypoglycemic brain damage, seizures, migraine headaches, hypoxic brain damage, and even AIDS dementia have been linked to excitotoxin damage. Even those born with metabolic defects in certain brain cells may be susceptible to excitotoxin damage. That's not even including the brain cancers from aspartame.
Neurons that use glutamate for a transmitter are destroyed by these high concentrations of glutamate, while other neurons that use other transmitters are spared.
Do we have proof that these excitotoxins are causing these diseases? Well, we don't. But if you think about the vast quantities of products that contain MSG and aspartame, surely consumption of these foods might at least aggravate these conditions or bring them on sooner. Scientific evidence is far too strong to ignore this possibility.
How can we fight the glutamate industry?
Tell others about the dangers and don't eat their poisonous products.
Come to us, we'll provide all your food.
The Glutamate Association is made up of food industry giants, manufacturers, and Ajinomoto that rely on the big taste to sell their chemicals and food. The glutamate industry is big business, and they can afford to counter any negative claims via lobby groups, fight those who want to inform others.
When Dr. Olney published his findings, he was immediately under fire from government-protected industry. A multitude of papers were published, attacking his data, claiming the opposite to Olney's findings.
All these distractors were in one way or another affiliated with the glutamate industry. Many complained that he was using immature test subjects that were more predisposed to toxicity, when they themselves were serving up MSG to babies. Industrial profits blinded logic.
The FDA have failed to protect the people. There was nothing to be done. The FDA were completely controlled by the food industry. Members of a subcommittee appointed to investigate the glutamate baby issue had strong financial ties with the glutamate or food industry.
Don't forget to tell them the FDA is the Food and Drug Administration. It's the American authority. It's called the FSA in the UK, the Food Standards Agency.
The committee chairman was receiving money from both industries. Even the factual warning pamphlet was put out by the glutamate industry until Dr. Schwartz pointed it out. The FDA removed it from circulation. Even studies conducted to push out Olney's findings were published in magazines with editorials, controlled by the very authors of the studies.
Let me get rid of that pesky Dr. Olney.
Watch out.
When Olney challenged in public forums, these people just produced stacks of deceptive studies. It seems the weight of the stacks of papers is more important than quality. It is obvious that the FDA has been captured by the chief MSG manufacturer, the Ajinomoto Company, the food industries and their public relations organization, the Glutamate Association, by producing a multitude of spurious studies purportedly showing that MSG is safe as a food additive. They can say with impunity.
The weight of the scientific evidence demonstrates that MSG is safe for human consumption.
The public has the perception that the FDA, being a government organization, designed and dedicated to quality assurance and safety, would never allow an unsafe product to be used by the food industry. In fact, most of us assume that the FDA is, if anything, too cautious. This has been the case with their rulings on carcinogenic compounds in food. They have come under increasing criticism from a number of groups and scientists for using too stringent criteria. In this instance, we have seen that powerful industrial giants have been able to capture a government agency and use it to promote an unsafe product.
The FDA has failed to keep us safe, and unfortunately, the rest of the processed food world is cashing in too.
In 1971, Dr. W. A. Reynolds, and co-workers reported that they were unable to confirm Dr. Alna's previous findings, that MSG fed to infant monkeys consistently resulted in injuries to specific areas of the hypothalamus. That is, they found that large doses of MSG fed to newborn monkeys had no toxic effect on infant monkeys' brains. But Dr. Olney became suspicious of the study when he realized that they were feeding massive doses of MSG to these infant animals. In his experience, such doses almost always cause the animals to vomit. But if the monkeys did indeed vomit, Dr. Reynolds's data would have been completely invalid, since little of the MSG would actually have been absorbed.
Was Dr. Olney right?
Later, at a public hearing, Dr. Olney asked Dr. Reynolds if their monkeys vomited. In front of a large audience, she admitted that they had.
Yet, a few months later, when the report appeared in Science magazine, no mention was made of vomiting. A critical omission.
Outrageous.
We're not safe.
It's infuriating.
Outrageous. It's infuriating.
There are so many stories to tell of corruption and lies, the FDA chose to believe industry over independent research. They approved MSG and the other hidden nasties to have GRAS status, generally recognized as safe. Once it acquired that label, all other countries followed suit. Excitotoxin additives used in food eaten by pregnant women, such as MSG and aspartate, NutraSweet, could cause miswiring of the developing brain of their babies, should these excitotoxins pass through the placenta.
Because of the influx of excitotoxins, the fine chemical balance is disturbed.
And it should be noted, the child's brain is 4 times more sensitive than is the adult brain to these toxins.
Mama.
Some neuroscientists feel that excitotoxins added to foods and fed to newborns and young children can result in this type of overstimulation. Sometimes the effects might be subtle, such as a slight case of dyslexia, or more severe, such as frequent outbursts of uncontrollable anger. In fact, injection of minute amounts of glutamate into the hypothalamus of animals has been shown to produce sudden rage.
A survey of children's diets indicated that they often consume the same amounts of MSG as adults. This is especially true with the large number of junk foods and fast foods containing massive amounts of MSG and other excitotoxin taste enhancers, such as flavored crisps, canned soups, pies, takeaways, sauces, and diet drinks containing aspartame. Ever heard of Chinese restaurant syndrome? It's the MSG they use in copious amounts to make it taste good, so good that you want to keep eating it.
It is known that early damage to the frontal lobes of the brain can lead to arrested moral and social development. Our moral development occurs during the early stages of behavioral development and allows us to be able to concentrate and retain what we are taught.
Why can't I understand simple things?
Man is 5 times more sensitive to these excitotoxins than the mouse.
It also requires an ability to restrain our desires and emotions, otherwise known as self-control. One study of 2 adults who had suffered damage in early life to both of their frontal lobes demonstrated arrested development and learning disabilities in the realms of insight, foresight, social judgment, empathy, and complex reasoning. How many children are on drugs to control their behavior? An alarming amount.
It is important to realize that the obvious signs of injury to the frontal lobes of the brain may not become apparent until the child begins to interact with others on a more advanced social level, such as upon entering into school. The end result of exposure to dietary excitotoxins would depend on the severity and duration of the exposure, the age during which exposure occurred, and the child's individual inborn self-control mechanisms. Yet early, even subtle damage to the brain of the developing baby, while silent at the time, could possibly cause severe changes in their personality several decades later. Because of this delayed effect, proving a direct connection to early exposure to excitotoxin in the food would be very difficult.
We believe your behavior is unacceptable. Here, take this.
Imagine the punch-drunk boxer who over the years had accumulated brain damage. At first he takes the blows, but after the years he speaks slowly, or has difficulty remembering or thinking. This can happen to children and adults. What if it's in pet food? Does this make the dog more aggressive or likely to act out of character? Quite possibly.
I feel like this punch has taken ages to land.
Injury to the speech areas of the brain, for example, would not be evident in the newborn baby, but would be evident when the child began to learn to speak. Such injuries could result in delayed speech or stuttering. Likewise, damage to areas of the brain concerned with complex learning skills would not be evident until the child started school and was exposed to math and reading. Until that time, the child would be considered to be normal.
So that's what they're like inside.
What a strange-looking human.
The endocrine system is responsible for a network of glands that make the hormones that help cells talk to each other. They're responsible for almost every cell, organ, and function in the body.
I need to see a doctor.
If your endocrine system isn't healthy, you might have problems developing during puberty, getting pregnant, or managing stress. You also might gain weight easily, have weak bones, or lack energy because too much sugar stays in your blood instead of moving into your cells, where it's needed for energy.
I'm really craving those Pringles. I ate 2 packets yesterday.
Obesity can happen when one or more of those systems is not working. What can happen when MSG is fed to the unborn and the very young? Fed to them before their blood-brain barriers are well enough developed to protect the brain cells destined to control endocrine function later in life.
A 9-month-old Swiss mouse, untreated with MSG, shown alongside the heaviest pup in the litter, that was treated with MSG.
MSG moves through the incomplete or immature blood-brain barrier in the arcuate nucleus of the unborn and very young and kills brain cells or neurons, causing permanent damage to the endocrine system that controls appetite.
When delivered to the fetus in utero and/or fed to the very young, MSG produces brain damage that damages the endocrine system and causes obesity as children approach maturity. Diet and exercise will do little of a permanent nature for a person whose endocrine system has been damaged in this way.
Let's feed them more MSG rubbish food. Yay. We make lots of money. They can't help themselves, the poor fools are addicted.
If that isn't bad enough in both children and adults, continuous ingestion of MSG will raise some hormone levels, including levels of the hormone insulin. When the insulin level is raised, the glucose level is lowered, which is the body's signal to eat more food in order to raise or balance the glucose level, with the brain signaling the body to consume more food. Diet and exercise have little chance of controlling weight gain without a permanent, highly restrictive diet.
MSG is now a research tool used to produce obesity.
By the early 1980s, evidence of monosodium glutamate induced brain lesions and resultant endocrine disorders, including obesity, were so well documented that researchers interested in brain function and/or development of drugs with which to treat disease conditions in which glutamate played a role began to use monosodium glutamate as an ablative or provocative tool with which to kill selected brain cells and induce obesity.
It's true, I've got lots of scientific studies to prove it. Here's some short extracts.
Treatment of newborn mice with monosodium glutamate (MSG) is neurotoxic for hypothalamic arcuate nucleus (ARC) and causes obesity.
The hyperglycemia accompanied obese mouse model was developed through an injection of monosodium glutamate (MSG). Administering monosodium glutamate (MSG) to neonatal rodents induces obesity and type 2 diabetes.
University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, August 14, 2008. Summary: people who use monosodium glutamate, or MSG, as a flavor enhancer in their food are more likely than people who don't use it to be overweight or obese, even though they have the same amount of physical activity and total calorie intake, according to a study in the journal Obesity.
It is well known that the administration of monosodium glutamate (MSG) in early life will cause disturbances in the reproductive neuroendocrine axis by destroying the neurons in the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus.
To make matters worse, Ajinomoto is busy finding ways to attract people by its feel-good advertising on its website.
The concept is simple: teach kids about vegetables and they'll be more interested in eating them. Giving children the chance to harvest vegetables themselves, Nizaki explains, contributes to their general knowledge and food education. Cook-do seasonings are a quick and easy way for home cooks to enjoy good Chinese stir-fry without going to the restaurant. Even children can help out in the kitchen, meaning families benefit from spending even more time together.
Good eating habits start young.
Thanks for the flowers, but don't listen to them, kid.
We should get an award for how to successfully spin a lie.
Japanese maker pushes umami overhaul for much maligned MSG.
The long-standing claim that intake of MSG in food causes Chinese restaurant syndrome in humans is unfounded. Goya Wu, a professor of animal science at Texas A&M University who has studied MSG, told AFP, well-controlled scientific experiments have not shown any adverse effects of oral MSG on healthy people or relevant animal models, Wu said.
That's the message that Ajinomoto is now pushing in a U.S. $10 million, 3-year PR blitz. There's really no doubt that it's a safe food ingredient, insists Taya M. Rains, who is heading up Ajinomoto's campaign.
Lies.
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 I hope you found this information useful. Check out Truth in Labeling too.
Thank goodness it's finished. All this talk of food. I'm famished.
I must go. Thank you for taking the time to read the comics. I hope you found it informative. Remember to check the products you use, and don't forget that aspartame is as dangerous, especially when consumed with MSG and its hidden ingredients. Keep safe, keep reading about it, and protect your family.
And me.